Welcome to The Explainer. All right, let's talk about one of the biggest paradoxes on our planet. We call it the blue planet, right? But billions of people are thirsty. Today, we're going to try and unravel this incredibly complex story of water scarcity. I mean, it sounds kind of absurd when you say it out loud, doesn't it? Three-quarters of our world is covered in water. That's why we call it the blue planet. So how on earth are we constantly hearing about a massive global water crisis? How can both of those things be true at the same time? And look, this isn't some problem for our grandkids to figure out. The stakes are sky high and the clock is ticking. Fast. Projections are showing that by 2025, that's right around the corner, a staggering 2 billion people are expected to be living in places with absolute water scarcity. Just let that number sink in. Okay, so just to make this whole puzzle even more confusing, water is technically a renewable resource. You know, the hydrological cycle, it's constantly doing its thing, renewing and recharging our fresh water. So, if nature's got this built-in recycling system, what in the world are we doing so wrong? So, when you hear water shortage, what's the first thing you picture? Probably a desert, right? Some place that just doesn't get enough rain. But the real reasons for this crisis are way more complicated. And as we're going to see, they often have a lot more to do with us than with the weather. This right here, this is what really flips the script. The myth, the story we tell ourselves is that this is a natural problem. You know, no rain means no water. Simple. But the reality, well, it's usually a people problem. It's all about how we use and, frankly, abuse and share or don't share the water that we already have. So what's driving all this? Well, it's a few big things. A growing population means we need more of, well, everything. But the biggest water guzzler, by a long shot, is agriculture. Think about all the water it takes to grow our food. Then you add in industrial factories and huge, thirsty cities, and you've got this immense, constant pressure on our fresh water. And this brings up such a critical point. It's not always about how much water there is, but how good that water is. Think about it. A city like Kolkata can get absolutely drenched with rain. We're talking flooded streets. But people are still desperate for clean, safe drinking water. Because if the water is full of pollution, chemicals, and waste, it's like it's not even there. It's useless to us. Okay, so faced with this growing crisis, what was the big plan? Well, after independence, India went all in on a massive, really ambitious solution to both manage its water and power its growth. And that solution was something called multi-purpose river projects. And these weren't just your average dams for holding back water. No, the vision was much grander. They were supposed to be the engines of the whole country's development. The idea was to build these giant structures that could do it all, provide water for farms, generate tons of electricity for factories, control floods, the whole shebang. And this quote from India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, just says it all. Dams are the temples of modern India. I mean, that perfectly captures the hope, the sheer ambition that was poured into these giant concrete structures. They weren't just infrastructure, they were symbols of a new, modern, prosperous future. But you knew there was a but coming, right? Over time, it started to become pretty clear that this grand vision had a dark side. As more of these massive projects were built, people started noticing that the so-called perfect solution, well, it was creating a whole new set of problems. And the consequences were huge. These temples had a serious fallout. Damming a river just completely messes with its natural flow. It's terrible for the fish and other aquatic life. It floods huge areas of forest and farmland. It forces tons of people from their homes. And here's the real kicker. The very dams built to stop floods could actually cause them, because all this sediment builds up behind them, leaving less room for the water. So with all these problems and growing protests against the big dams, people started looking for another way, a better way. And you know where they found it? Not in some fancy new technology, but by looking backwards to the incredible, age-old traditions of water management that have existed in India for centuries. I mean, we're talking about a deep, deep history here. For literally thousands of years, people all across India had figured this stuff out. They had this amazing localized knowledge of the rain, the soil, the whole ecosystem. And they built these ingenious systems, everything from simple channels to huge artificial lakes that were perfectly designed for their specific environment. This wasn't a new fad. This was wisdom tested by time. And just look at how clever and diverse these techniques were. Up in the Himalayas, they built these diversion channels called ghouls or khols. Out in the deserts of Rajasthan, they had rain-fed storage structures called kadans and johads. Even in the flood-prone areas of Bengal, they figured out how to use those floodwaters to their advantage with special channels. Every single system was a genius-level adaptation to the local landscape. So let's take one of the most common methods, rooftop harvesting. It's especially popular in Rajasthan, and it's brilliant in its simplicity. You collect the rain that falls on your roof, a pipe carries it down, it gets filtered through some sand and bricks, and then it's stored in a cool underground tank called a tanka. The water they get this way, they call it Palar Pani, is considered the absolute purest form of water, and it's a total lifeline when everything else dries up. Okay, if you need one final piece of proof that these old-school methods are still game changers today, get ready for the ultimate paradox. Let's talk about the city of Shillong. It's just a stone's throw away, about 55 kilometers from Mazenram, the single wettest place on planet Earth. And yet, Shillong itself has a severe water shortage. How does that even make sense? So what do? How do they solve this completely baffling problem? You guessed it. They use that same ancient technique. Almost every single house in the city has a rooftop rainwater harvesting system. And that simple, small-scale approach meets up to 25% of their total water needs. It just goes to show how powerful this idea is, even in a place you'd least expect it. So all of this kind of leaves us with a big question to chew on, doesn't it? For decades, we thought the answer to our water problems was to go big, massive dams, huge projects. But what if the real answer isn't about building bigger at all? What if it's about thinking smaller, thinking wiser, and finally embracing the incredible wisdom that's been right there, waiting for us all along?